name is Mark Rinaldi. For those of you who don't know me, Director of Product Management for Workforce Planning, Strategic Workforce Planning, among other things, based out of the Boston area. I started with Hyperion back in 1998, took a brief hiatus for a couple of years, came back, that was all in a consulting role. So I've been working with planning since the 1.0 days and came back into the product management role. So here I'm just going to go through what we're looking to offer in terms of new feature functionality coming out on premises. Oh, sorry. I threw it in there for you, Paul. So up in the cloud, so obviously as you know, I don't get paid unless I show the safe harbor statement, but clearly this is what I'm about to show you is not yet generally available. It is coming out fairly soon. I think legally I had 2 options this year instead of 3. One was to say within the next 12 months or within this fiscal year. Technically where we stand now with Oracle's funky May fiscal is actually the shortest one for me to say, but the old one I liked was calendar year. And if I were allowed to say that, I'd say that one. So coming soon, hopefully to a theater near you. We're going to talk about how strategic workforce fits into workforce. And if you haven't been through any of the other sessions around workforce, there have been others. This K-Scope session that you can download to learn more about workforce. I had done some last year. If you're a member of ODTUG, you should be able to download presentations that we've done in the past, but we're going to focus on strategic workforce planning, which is part of workforce. And it is in there right now, but it's a one-liner. It's a very bare bones minimum type of approach right now, high customization effort needed. So what we've done is we're looking to enhance that and provide more out-of-box functionality and configurability. And as is typical with EPBCS, you have the opportunity to use all 4 business processes: financials, workforce, capital, and projects, as well as that sitting on top of core PBCS, so you still have your normal free cubes to do other customizations. And again, one of the big value adds that we see with EPBCS is the ability to do incremental enablement. Right? So that way you don't have to turn everything on at once, and that includes within, as you'll see as we go through the presentation and the demo, you'll see that within workforce you don't have to turn on what I call more now the classic compensation workforce piece of it. You can just do strategic workforce. And why this is important, and if you've seen us talking about this over the whole week here, beyond finance, right? We do have a number of customers that are starting this now, and we're doing a lot of deals with the HR department. And so we're seeing a lot of uptick in this. So this is where the incremental enablement comes into play, where they don't have to do any of the finance stuff if they don't want to. Again, the benefits of out-of-box content, upgradable, you can customize. We don't overwrite what you customize. We'll honor that on upgrade, things of that sort. So just a quick glance, from a classic, what I call the compensation workforce planning piece of workforce is managing your employees and jobs, new hires, transfers, things of that sort. Defining benefits and taxes through a wizard, best practices, being able to do demographic reporting, gender, age band, things of that sort, analyzing that information. When we talk about strategic, and I've shown this slide in the past, maybe it's modified a little bit, but again, just more of a refresher for those who haven't seen it. As we're looking to deliver this more robust capability, we're trying to get at understanding what the workforce skills are like. So this is where we're trying to understand right skill, right place, the right time. The example I like to use is if you're a software development company and the executives decide that you're programming in C++, but in 5 years we want to be on Java. This is where you need to look and see, well, what resources do we have that even know Java, and how well do they know it? Do we need to retrain them? Can we upskill the folks that we have, or do we have to go externally? So this is a strategic workforce is definitely much more of a longer-term view, 5-10 years out. Right? And really just trying to look at what the executive plans are, what the goals are, so that the human resources or the hiring plans can be more proactive than reactive. Okay? So looking at skills is one thing. We also have a lot of operational demand drivers that we can look at. Call centers that might have number of calls you're expecting to bring in, number of the size of deals, number of units produced. Whatever it is that is the demand that drives your FTE requirements, this is where you can configure those to meet your needs. We have a lot of out-of-box functionality coming with this to help make that go smoother. Then you obviously, so that's the demand. So you're again looking out 5 or 10 years, or whatever the range you want it to be, to then look at what the executive direction is. Where do we think we're going? Is our call center going to get more calls? We think it's actually going to drop. things of that sort. But then you have your supply as well, right? I already have people here, but you tend to have attrition, so what is that going to look like, right? So if we go back to the Java example, okay, I have people that have Java skills, great. So when we need them in 5 years, we're all set. But then, oh, wait a second, they're all 64 years old. Right? 5 years from now, are they likely to be here? Right? So understanding your attrition, what's going to happen, what's the turnover like, compare that now that you have your demand, what you expect the demand to be versus what you think is going to happen with your supply. This is where obviously you have an ability to do a little bit of analysis, right? So analyze and take action on that. What do I need to do? Do I need to do new hires? Do I have to terminate people? Do I have to reshuffle people? I have different excess one area, I can move them into another. Okay? So a couple notes about strategic workforce planning. It's valid only for a job only or an employee and job level of granularity. So by powers of deduction, the one that is missing is employee only. Right? When we think of doing strategic workforce planning, we think you're doing this by job, not by individual employee. Right? Trying to do demand planning out by employee doesn't seem to make sense to us. So if you've only enabled employee only, this wouldn't work for you in that particular application. Okay? It is a feature within workforce, as I said. So this is how it works because we can work in conjunction with this. What I typically expect to see, although it doesn't have to be, is it's probably a separate scenario, different from what you might be doing for the classic compensation piece if you're doing that. It doesn't have to be, but I think that probably makes the most sense. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it is important to note it can be completely enabled independently of the compensation workforce. Again, we do have customers now that are implementing this that are workforce only, and believe it or not, they're strategic workforce only, they're HR, and believe it or not, they don't care about the financial impact. They probably care, but as a cursory glance. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So demand and supply are required. We figure if you're doing strategic workforce planning, you're looking to do demand and supply planning. But the other options are all things that you can choose to enable or not. Okay, and we'll go through some of those screenshots. When we talked about the skills assessment, we come out of the box with 3 default categories: behavioral, managerial, and technical. You can rename those, or the alias, if you don't like those. You can add more on your own. What is something to make sure we understand here is we don't come up with any of the individual skills within that, because I don't know what those may be for any customer that's out there. And I'd rather not have you have to rename every single one of them that I come out with, so nothing comes out of the box underneath those categories. You define what they are. You'll see as we go through the demo some examples that we've done, but this is where you get to define. There are the 3. We think those are fairly standard. That's why we have 3 coming out of the box. But if you want a 4th, a 5th, up through 10, whatever you need, you can add those in. And I'll show you how we can incorporate that with our out-of-box dashboards coming out of the box. Okay. As far as the demand planning section, again, this is where nothing out of the box in terms of what your demand drivers are. I don't precede number of calls or invoices or anything else. You define what your drivers are, what they need to be. You'll know it better than I will. Okay. What we do provide, though, are 4 calculation options for demand driver logic. Okay? The current GA release has just the demand time driver times rate functionality built in. So is anyone using the strategic workforce planning out of the box now? No hands go up yet? Okay. So previous year's ratio. So this is where we're just looking at, hey, I had X many people last year, and I had X many invoices or number of calls, whatever that driver was for that job, for that entity. I know what that ratio was, and so I can carry that ratio forward. But it's not just as simple as that. Some of the feedback we got from some of our earlier adopters to this is there's actually a very complex, well, it's not really complex, it's math, right? But a logarithmic scaling to understand the impact on doubling, right? So when you normalize it on a natural log scale, it helps to work better in terms of what they've seen in terms of reality. So there are some logarithmic calculations going on behind the scenes here, but effectively it's the previous year's ratio accounted for some statistical modeling. Okay? Demand driver divided by rate, and by the way, the previous year's ratio is the default one. If you don't choose a driver, and I'll show you that in the screens, that's going to be the default behavior, and I expect that's going to be one of the more popular ones. However, the driver divided by rate is one that we see a lot in the services industry. Consulting firms, their driver may be project revenue, and for every 5 million in project revenue, I need a partner. For every 5 million in project revenue, I need 3 senior managers, whatever the case may be. So those are some examples of what you do with driver divided by rate. Driver times rate, again, it's just something, all right, here's the driver, and based on that, I'm going to have X% of that in terms of a need for a manager or something along those sorts. So we have those three. We think those are pretty, the wide-ranging industry usage of what we see with demand driver. But then through some feedback, and again, this is cloud, so we can adapt more quickly. We'd heard some feedback from other customers doing other areas of EPBCS where they felt they didn't have the exact calculation methodology they needed to use, so they were doing more custom stuff. So what we decided to do is just add a fourth option called custom. So we put a hook right out there for you. If the other three don't work for you, here's the hook. Put whatever logic you want in there, and then that's out-of-box configurable within the framework. So it's not custom. Custom has seemed to become an evil word, or these days. So it's configuration, right? So again, that's just all supported inside the product. We assign the drivers to jobs per entity. So this is where by job, or by hopefully strategic job. So you may have a list of 500 jobs, but maybe for strategic purposes, you're only worried about 100 of them, maybe 200 of them, 3, or whatever the case may be. So we're actually using, and we'll show you through in the demo here, using attributes. So an attribute dimension comes out of the box when you turn on strategic workforce planning. It's called job type. It goes against the job dimension, and this is where you can define whether it's strategic or not strategic, or you can get a little bit more robust because it might be strategic for Europe, strategic for North America. Right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is where you assign those drivers per job, and you can choose to pick the ratio per driver. Right? Another one that's in there is the ability to turn on a scaling factor. So when we talk about the previous year's ratio calculation, there's a demand scaling factor that we can weigh in. As we're doing that logarithmic calculation for doubling and what have you, we want to recognize that you might want to say, you know what, last year's ratio isn't exactly going to apply this year or next year, because maybe I had hired a bunch of new people fresh out of college, and now that they've got a year under their belt, we're expecting there to be more efficiency. So even given the same number of transactions or whatever that demand driver is, next year I don't need the same ratio anymore because I'm expecting efficiencies in terms of just employment. People have gotten better at their jobs. The other one we offer is, and the demand scaling factor works with previous year's ratio only. It defaults to 100% on the other options. And if you put something in there, it doesn't do anything with it. The other one is expected productivity gains. So this is where you know ahead of time that maybe you had a call center and you're implementing a new phone system that's going to make it easier, better, feel like they can handle more at a time. So it's just another factor that you can add on to the mix. Again, these are optional that you can enable or not to factor into that previous year's ratio calculation. Or this one does work with the others as well. Right? So it's just giving you another factor to say, all right, that's what the rate is. It's the driver divided by rate. But you know what, we've got this thing where I think we need to have a little extra, we know something's going to change in the market or in our business. We have some new technology coming in, whatever the case may be. We'll apply that factor to it. We do, since our core and bread and butter is finance, we throw in this ability to do a calculated average demand compensation. And so this is where, so you can see the financial impact of it if you want to see that. Ultimately, as we go forward through this, that's not coming out soon, but probably not too far thereafter, is if you have enabled the compensation workforce planning piece, instead of you entering in the average compensation rates by job, to just pull it from what the real solution is, or the real numbers are. In terms of supply planning, right now we come out of the box with only 2 drivers. So on the demand side, you define what your drivers are. On the supply side, there were few of them out there. So as we did our analysis, it looked like it's 2 ways of looking at it. Do I have attrition that is more driven by age band? So older folks tend to stay, younger folks tend to move. You know how to go between. Then the other one is by job. Maybe you have your more junior roles that have higher turnover versus your more senior roles that have less turnover. Okay? So this is where you can, if you have these metrics from your HR system, that you can pull in what your actual attrition rates are, bring them in. Okay? Optionally, you can turn on retirements, right? And we say optionally, especially there are a lot of folks in different countries around the world worried about personally identifiable information. Maybe you can't put in date of birth and calculate that, but this is where if you have the date of birth in there, we'll calculate the age, and then you can put in an expected retirement age, whether it's statutory or just based off of your company's history. what historically, I'm sure all of your companies, the average retirement age is 50. Right? Wouldn't that be nice? So this is where we can calculate that attrition or that impact on your existing supply based on retirement age. To my point earlier about looking at those Java developers that are all 64 and I need them in 5 years. The graying of the workforce, right? The buzz phrase. And then similarly to demand, we have the ability to take that same average compensation rate and calculate out your supply. So you can see the financial impact on that. We'll see this in a little bit bigger screen in a bit, but this is where we've expanded the enablement options within Workforce for strategic before. So again, from the start, you just had the one line at the top, strategic workforce modeling. That's what you see today. As we enhance this and coming out soon, we'll have these additional options. And again, like I said, the demand and the supply will automatically turn on, but nothing else will be checked. So you can choose to do the scaling factor or not, the productivity gains factor or not, age retirement, whether you want to track skills assessment or even do anything with the financials. Okay? So this is what the change of what's coming with the new, what we call more robust strategic workforce planning capability. What this does is it gives us a few areas. I've got a few of them highlighted here. The only one I didn't show in the screenshot because it didn't fit in the screen, I didn't feel like cutting and pasting, is the job type attribute dimension. But here what you'll see, if you've, again, depending on what you've enabled, I've enabled all the pieces. So there's where you can manage the new skills and categories. And we'll go through, I have some screenshots of this, but then we'll jump into a demo. The demand drivers. And then what we've also done is recognize that you might want to have a valid intersection set up, valid combinations for strategic purposes or for just controlling what jobs show up so that if you have 500 jobs and you log into your cost center, you don't just see all 500, you see the ones that make sense to you. Right? Out of curiosity, how many in the room are customers in the room? Customers? 1, 2, 3, 4-ish? Rest of you implementation partners? All right. How many of you, customer-wise or implementation-wise, have worked with EPBCS? And that looks like about a third to half, maybe. I don't know. Okay. Strategic. Anyone using workforce planning? Okay. All right. And I'd already asked, so no one's really using strategic just yet. But like I said, we're seeing a big uptick on that. So okay. So here's just, again, some screenshots. We'll go through this in the video, but this is where we're trying to use wizards to help make this easy for the non-finance person or the non-Hyperion PhD to be able to manage this. Just another wizard that we've added. If you're familiar with workforce planning, we have a lot of wizards out there, or EPBCS in general, but this is where you can add new categories. Again, you see the 3 that come out of the box. You can't change our name, but you can certainly change the alias. That's always true, but again, you can add more if you want. Same thing with the skills. If I switch the category versus the component, now I'm picking one of the individual technical skills. Again, this is where I'm saying nothing is going to come out of the box here. This is where you define what your company's technical skills are that you need, or any of the other categories. Okay. Same thing with demand drivers, same wizard. Again, if you've used EPBCS, these should look familiar to you. Right? Let's come back to that in a second here. So let's go and do a quick demo. I am prepared to do a live demo if we have to or want to, but we're encouraged because you never know about the network connection to do some recording. So I'll play this a little bit here. So just to show you what some of these screens look like.
Mark, I'm sorry, I have to run in there. I have one question. If we configure this as employee and job versus just job, are the options any different for the strategic workforce?
So the question is, because this is being recorded, make sure everyone can hear it in the room, is if you enable it for employee and job versus just job, are there any differences? In some cases, yes, because specifically around supply, right? Because supply wouldn't have your employee if it's just a job only. So the age-based retirement is not going to really come into play on a job-only model, right? Again. All right, so as we go in, you'll notice there's the card, Strategic Workforce Planning. For those of you who were at the Sunday Symposium, I kind of quickly went over this. I think I had like 4.5 minutes, and I think I breathed 3 times in that. So just a little bit more time here. So with EPBCS in general, we always start with a dashboard, visualization, a quick look at things. Here's where a review of employee information. So we start putting out some information based on what you load up in terms of quick things for your managers to look at and say, all right, who are my people? Is it right? Is there something that's glaring wrong there? Again, you'll see that age is out here. Again, we're actually to load the date of birth, and we're actually calculating that age. So that's actually a calculated field. And some other information, but I have seen other customers that have expanded this, again, which is why we allow it to be configurable, right? You can have more information, you can remove some of that information. Again, if you haven't turned on age-based retirement, that age wouldn't even show up there. Again, this is just meant to give you a quick view of who it is that you have in your department or in your entity to know that you're dealing with the right information. What I will note too, just as an aside from working with this for a while, with work, this holds true for workforce as well. The start month that you see there, let's get back. The start month that you see here, that says start month, and you've got September. This is not their hire month. This is the month in which you want the calculations to start occurring. Okay, so if you know you have new hires in the system that are coming on board in 3 months, because you already have them in your HR system or your hiring plan, you can bring that in, you can start the calculation further out. Right? So just important to note that that's not just hire month. I've seen that come across a few times. I was highlighting there that we have the strategic job. So that job type attribute mentioned is there to help filter on the form. Again, here we're showing the compensation rates where you could enter those in, any means of entering them. You could calculate them, you could import them, you could directly enter them, you could source them from your compensation workforce planning piece. If we look at this is a fun one. This is one the HR folks love to see, just different visualizations, right? This is something that certainly if you're coming from the on-prem world, you really just don't have access to this type of dashboarding outside of OBI or things of that sort, but within planning itself. So this is just meant to give you a quick visualization of, all right, where am I? These are all my skills that are going around that I've loaded up. If you can see here, not in the back of the room, the blue is FY18 and the green is FY22. So I'm doing a 5-year plan here. So this is just giving me a quick visualization that I'm not quite where I need to be anywhere. Right? So you can see here on communication skill set, and this is again for the sales US entity, right? So this is just for my entity. I can see that I've got a little bit of a gap to go for communication, but I'm probably closer on that one than I am on territory management. So in sales, I've got a little bit of a gap going on there. Again, you can always change these. If these don't work for you, you can modify them. You can eliminate them. But we're just giving you a couple of different visualizations in terms of scatter plot, radar chart, things of that sort. So then what we do is we break this down by the 3 categories that come out of the box, so behavioral, managerial, and technical, just to give you another averaging of what it looks like at just a different visualization. But then the other thing we do here in this bottom right-hand quadrant is we're looking at the average of all the skills. Okay, and so this is where we have your 3 categories that come out of the box. The reason why we do this is because we don't know how many, if any, additional ones you're going to add. Right? So I can't just pre-populate a bunch of grids with all of them. So what we've done is we've got an average sitting here. So as you add 3 or 4 or 5 more, they will all show up on this average skills. Right? This is dynamically reading, level 0 descendants of the member where you put them in. So for those of you who know how that works, so that'll pick that up. But then you can come in and choose to display more if you want to see those more in detail, or even just remove them. But again, this is giving you a visualization of the 3 that come out of the box, and then we're giving you a slightly different view of those, but also being able to pick up any of the additional ones you add on your own. And these are all drillable, and you can expand any of these. Then what we have is here's just a very basic form in terms of being able to enter in those skills. And in this case, we're just assuming a 0 through 5 scaling. Right? 5 being you're great, you're exactly where you need to be. 0, you need help. Right? So very simple. We've got the start and end year. Industry analysis tells us they're not looking at you to do this year by year. Again, if you're doing a 5-year plan, you're trying to see where you need to get. But this is, again, something that if you want to look at this year by year, you can modify the form. Right? But the starting point is the start year, FY18, the end year of FY22. I need them to get to 4. Pretty simple math going on here. You can pretty this up if you want. You can add charts and graphs to it as well. But basically, we're looking at this by employee, so again, another potential difference if you're job only. Right? So then if we continue this, if something is missing, we're suppressing missing values here, things of that sort. So if you're missing something, you notice I don't have Oracle database in here. I've got SBase, straight to Hyperion Planning, social media things. So I don't see that. So what you can do is you can highlight that individual employee under the actions, select skill assessment. So this is just bringing you to another form that is not suppressing, right? It's limited to that one. Then you could enter in the values for Oracle database, whatever the case may be. You're a 1 now, but we need you to get there. So then the other thing to note is we've got this breadcrumb trail to help get you back, right? So you can click back on, because we used an action menu to bring you back to the form. This is the other way to just follow back to where you were. Now that we've come back, you'll notice that the Oracle DB is now showing on the form. Clearly, we also have the form that we brought you to anyway, which is doing the suppression. We've just put up on the page the employee and job, right? So we're not showing everything together. But again, typically what we're seeing is people are able to either import this in from their HR system, or they'll import it in or use SmartView or something like that to bring that in. Any questions so far on the skills assessment piece that we just talked about? No? Everyone's just thrilled and excited? Yeah. So this is the problem with having right before lunch, right? Everyone's looking for the food. So again, now if we switch over to demand planning, so again, here's where we'll see those drivers. Again, I've added or configured the invoices, sales calls, contracts. There are the 4 calculation logics that are available. This is where you're assigning it by driver. What is the ratio I want to use? Okay, I'm doing this at the entity level here, right? Not the job level, you'll notice. And this is where I'm entering in my metrics. Then I can come to this demand by entity form. We've got a few views of this, but this is where by job, I'm assigning what the driver is for that job, right? Some of them may be based on sales calls, others based on sales contract values, right? I can also override at the job level what the calculation logic is, if I want to do it at a more detailed level. This is where I'm entering in those rates. Maybe it's the 5 million for sales director. I need for every 5 million in contract revenue, I need a sales director. 3.5 million. This is where I'm entering in those demand scaling and expected productivity gains. Again, you'll notice that the 100% is there for the ones that are driver divided by rate. And then we're just showing you what the resulting calc is. So here's my actual, what I had for my previous year's ratio, and you'll see that this is based on those drivers, based on the calc logic that I've selected. This is what it says I need. Okay? We also had a request to flip the axis around. So instead of it doing it by entity, we're doing it by job. So entity would be in the rows rather than the jobs. So we've had one customer in particular that very well known in this space who says that they do it by job, focus on the job up in the POV, and then do it for all the entities that they own. Here I've only loaded up one, so it just has the sales US, but that would have all of them listed. So all we're doing, it's multi-dimensional, right? So all we do is we added different forms to show it either way. Then through the navigation flow, you can choose if you only want to do it one way, you can hide or delete those ones from the navigation flow that you're going to use. But it's just giving you a different option to do that. We always give you an opportunity to put in an adjustment because you may know of something beyond the demand scaling, beyond the expected productivity gains factor. You still may, at the end of the day, just want to plug a number because you know you're doing a mass hiring or, well, let's not talk about the or, right? So it just gives you the ability to do an adjustment. And then the importance of that is then going to impact, for a previous year's ratio calc, it's going to impact the ratio going forward. So we're factoring that in. If you do manual adjustments, we're picking up the total demand FTE in that calculation. Okay. And a quick view of the compensation. So again, because we've loaded in those average compensation rates based on the demand, we can calculate out what that financial impact is. Okay. If we look at supply, again, always start with a visualization. But this is where you, by entity, you can choose which driver for attrition makes sense for your entity. So again, this can be different by entity, right? Some might say, hey, my entity is by job. I'm the calls operations center or what have you. Another one might be, finance, and it could differ between the age or the job band. So you choose what the driver is per entity. That's why I didn't do a live demo. So again, this is where you can enter in what the retirement ages are. And again, these don't have to be legal, and this can be by, so if you have it by country, you can do this by country or by entity. What is the expected retirement age? Maybe it's going to change over time. Again, statutory, or could just be based off of your experience, right? If you have historical information from your HR or payroll systems, probably HR, that say when people historically are leaving, you'd probably want to enter that in so you can factor in the reality of what you're typically seeing in your industry or in your company. And if you didn't enable the retirement age, you wouldn't even see those screens. So here we're entering in the attrition rate by age band. Again, this could be something that you just make up on the fly, or preferably have this metric in your HR system or some kind of data warehouse or what have you. What are your trends for the 25 and under? Right now we come out with, there are two, so I did a lot of Google researching on the typical age bands in the HR world. There were two, I picked one of them. We do have future enhancement ideas allowing you to just configure that on your own, but those are the age bands that we have starting off with out of the box. Okay? So again, you enter in, again, you'd expect maybe the younger crowd to have a higher turnover rate than the folks closer to the 70 years old or what have you, or in the 60s. Again, this is where you can make guesses, or this is where you also see a good use of predictive analytics, right? Predictive planning. Any of you familiar with predictive planning, underlying crystal ball technology, right? Right now, it's available. It's been available for several years in SmartView, but back in December or January, we added it to the cloud. So now, directly from this form, you could click on the Actions button, and one of them is predictive planning, and it can take a look at your trends to see what the statistical modeling suggests your attrition would be if you have the right data set. Right, the more historical data you have, the better the statistical modeling will be. So then again, if it's by age band, you can enter in your age band rates. Again, you'd expect the more junior roles to have higher turnover than the more senior roles, but similar concepts. So again, depending on which option you selected in the driver, it's going to pick up those rates and then calculate it. And then what you should note is, again, FY17 is my historical. You can see that I'm starting with 2.8. I think I can actually play this. I think I highlight this on the mouse here. The starting for the next year is 2.8. Then with my turnover, it's going to grow. And sort of, it's like a rolling balance, right? My ending balance from the previous year is my starting balance. So if I don't do anything based on my historical rate of attrition and the driver I selected between age band or job for my entity, again, entity by entity, it could be different. If I don't do anything by FY22, I'm going to have 0.6 people left in that role. That suggests I might have to do something about that. Then we also are calculating the headcount as well. So we're doing FTE, but you can also do the headcount as well. So that's where we're just doing some rounding, right? The only funky rounding we're doing is if it's greater than 0 but less than 1, we're just calling it a 1. So if your FTE was 0.2, we're actually calling that a 1 headcount, because I don't think you'd just have 0.2 people. So we're not rounding them down to 0. That's the only funky math we're doing, if that confuses anyone. But after that, it's just pure rounding for headcount. And again, here's the compensation. Again, if you turn that on, now we can see what my supply compensation is. So now that I have my demand and my supply, I get to do my variances, right? So out of the box, we have some charts and graphs here, just pure table form, just so you can see what my supply and demand are for this entity, what the variance is looking like, so you can kind of see by, if I get out to FY22, I'm up to about a 20-person delta here, if I don't do anything based on my historical information, right? This is important information for the HR department, or even the cost center managers themselves, if the finance people are doing it, to know, gee, we have a potential problem here, right? What are we going to do to address that? You see a big gap like this on that chart, you've got to close that gap, right? And then just another one that we have out of the box is just supply versus demand. We're just flipping it on headcount as opposed to just doing the FTE for those that are interested. A lot of the people I've been talking to, most of them are more concerned about FTE than headcount, but it's something obviously very easy for us to do. And there are a few that were saying they look at it, for headcount itself. So we've just done the same type, a similar type of graphs, just showing it at the headcount level. So to get there from the configuration area, again, I showed you some of these screenshots, but just maybe this will be a little bit bigger. We've got the enablement screen. Again, you'll see that the section is now expanded. As I mentioned, the demand and supply will automatically be selected if you choose strategic workforce planning. The others are all optional. Okay? Yes?
Are any of those toggle in, after the fact, anything, choose now or not now? Or
Yep. So the question is, are there any of these that you have to choose now, or can you turn them on later, or what have you? It's getting at that incremental enablement piece. So for the most part, incremental enablement is exactly that. Turn it on when you want it. The one potential difference, and I'm trying to see if this is a bug, is age-based retirement, because we're using an additional dimension, right? And once we've created a cube, right now we don't support adding dimensions or removing dimensions to those cubes. So that one right there is the only one that, as of this moment, if it goes out the door the way it is today, that's the only one to just be cognizant of. The others you could turn on after the fact. That's the beauty of incremental enablement, right? And again, under Safe Harbor, we do have plans to handle adding dimensions to existing cubes. I mean, obviously, we've been doing that for years in the Hyperion space. We know how to handle it. The issue is, you think about all the predefined content that we've just looked at, all those forms, all those dashboards, all the rules. We have to address it. We have to have a UI that says, what do you want to do with the data? Because you're going to have to tell us which member it needs to go to. What do we do with our out-of-box content? Things like that. So it's something we're aware of, we're working towards, but it's not there yet. So that's the only one that I would be, that you have to make a conscious decision about is age-based retirement. Great question. Okay, so again, you'll see the job type here now. Again, this is just the simple import screen comes in, but this is just telling you I'm not coming out of the box with any of those attributes, but the filtering on the forms is expecting it, so you'll need to load that. This is where we manage the strategic skills. Again, if you saw the Sunday symposium, I went through this, but if you want to add a skill to behavioral skills, again, nothing comes out of the box here, right? You define what those skills are, right? So learns well or what have you. And then if you want to flip the axis around, this is where we can choose. You see the three that come out of the box, but if we want to add another category, again, through a nice simple UI, you can import this in, you could add it in. It's a dimension ultimately, so you could do it through any number of means. But this is where you can enter in your new category. Okay. Once you've added the category, you'll see that you can now select that from the list and then enter in whatever the new skills are for that. Again, if it's one or two or three or four, 5 is about my break point for doing it from this UI. Above 5, I'm either importing, using SmartView admin extension, some other means to get there. Right. Okay. And then again, similar UI from the demand drivers. Again, nothing comes out of the box. You define what they are. What we don't have pre-built into it right now, and something that you'll want to, in my opinion, is you can leverage valid intersections, right, to help control what shows up. And some of this, we're waiting on some enhancements to have valid intersections support smart lists. So we're working through all of that, but that's something that you know, if you have a whole listing here, you want to control what people see, which ones. So those are the things that we want to continue to enhance the product with. Okay. And then last was just the valid combinations for jobs. So again, out of the box, we're coming up with a valid intersection. I do want to change the default behavior because I think if you don't do anything and you've enabled strategic workforce planning, all of your other intersections don't work because this is defaulted to just entity, scenario, and job. So I think we need to change that behavior a little bit, but just be aware of that. So here I'm just saying for all entities other than strategic planning for the scenario, make all jobs valid. But then for strategic planning for all entities, I only want the ones that are the attribute strategic job. Right, we added the ability to put attribute dimensions in valid intersections a few months back. So I think that might have also been in the December, January timeframe. So again, this is where, again, you can define, I've created an attribute member called strategic job. Again, you could have had strategic EMEA, strategic Latin America, strategic North America, whatever you feel is the appropriate one to mix. And again, you can then further sub-select the entity on that to help further control what they see. Okay, when they filter on those forms. Okay. So with that quick demo, what I tried to show you were the new enablement options, what you get when you turn those on, right? So the job type dimension, attribute dimension you have to account for, the skills, you have to load skills, or categories. Additional categories are obviously optional, but skills are mandatory if you've selected that. Add the drivers, and then define a valid combination, a valid intersection to control what people see on their screen. The other thing we have out of the box, but it's built into the forms themselves in the dashboards, was the 4 calculation logic pieces of previous year's ratio, driver divided by rate times rate and custom. Any questions on the enablement piece or configuration? Is this resonating with anybody? I see one nod. Anyone? For the implementation partners, does this, if you've been through EPBCS, does this have a similar look and feel to what you've done with the rest of EPBCS? Hopefully you're saying yes because that was the intent, right? Yes, I see some more vigorous nodding going on now. Yes, we're trying to make this all look similar. Okay, so if we get back to the presentation here. So another piece I want to talk about, and again, show of hands, how many people were at the Sunday symposium and actually lasted the whole day, or at least the afternoon sessions, or Mike Casey's session? Okay, so Mike Casey stole my thunder, right? I've been working with Mike Casey a lot as we do this integration with HCM, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that, but I also want to talk about how it can be used for any other source system, okay? So this is an actual HCM slide, whoops. This is an actual HCM slide deck that they use, and they have included us, and I've shown this in the past, but they include us up here as the strategic workforce. So this is where the HCM team recognizes they have a gap in their offering that doesn't allow for the strategic workforce planning. And they came to the realization that, hey, we're here at Oracle, and I understand that there's this product that does planning and forecasting pretty well, and it's called PBCS or EPBCS, right? So we've been working with them extensively to help fill a gap that they have. We've gotten over the initial hurdles of some terminology and some of the training that we've done for the sales force out there, because the HCM sales reps say, oh, strategic planning, yeah, we've got workforce modeling. You know, we can do all that already in here. So there's some terminology that we had to get over and to recognize that it truly is additional functionality, not repetitive, okay, not redundant. So what we've done is we've built out an HCM to EPBCS. It's one way right now. We're working on the other direction, but that's more the HCM team has to work on that, right? Because they need to take it from us and put it into their area. So what we've done is we're using seeded extracts. We do have this available right now in a form of a white paper that's available on my Oracle support. So if you're an official customer or partner, you can get access to that white paper. We've published that. For our partners, we've put it on the partner workspace we share information through. But we have these these seeded extracts that will pull both metadata and data from HCM. Okay. We then pull that information in, and this is where you can, right now that's a file-based to take out. You can't automate it. I'm being told to use like a SOAP call. I don't know what a SOAP call is, so please don't ask me about that one. But that's more calls that are done to execute the data extract functionality in HCM. Once we get that, so we take the initial setup of what we're doing is you have to take those seeded extracts from EPBCS, so those will be in the data management, data management, DM in the cloud. So that's where those are. I have some screenshots on this, and I think Mike showed you this in his demo, and you can in his recording. And we can push those to HCM Cloud, right? So get those files up there. Today, those are available in that white paper. We've got a zip file with all these files, but they are also available coming when, actually 1706. This is actually out right now. This is live, okay? So we load that up to there, and then so what we're doing is we're pulling out entity, org, job, position, any other metadata they have, some examples. We're using the BI Publisher for those of you who know HCM and how they use extracts. The reason we're using BI Publisher, the default extract out of HCM data extract is XML format. DM doesn't support XML on the way in, so we have to make it a CSV file, so therefore we've used the BI Publisher. All of that stuff is built into those files that we provide as seeded extracts. Okay? We load those up, you can load those up via EPM Automate, so you can automate it coming in. And then what we also have is the potential for you to be able to trim that hierarchy, because you might want to load all of that. You might not want to do your strategic workforce planning at the full org structure that exists in HR, right, or in HCM. Right? So maybe load that up to an ASO cube, right? And then trim that hierarchy as appropriate for your strategic workforce planning, right? And then identify any mappings that you may have. Okay? From a data perspective, we have automation already. So you can see this color coding down here can be automated as the upper level here, the metadata coming from HCM to EPBCS. On the data side, it's already there. So within DM, we have direct connectivity. You can set it up as a source. I've got some screenshots, and again, Mike did a whole video on this, so I don't want to repeat everything. But you can launch the HCM extract directly from DM. Right? And then it'll import directly into EPBCS, going through any mappings you defined. That is available today, right? 1706. What we're working on, future phase safe harbor statement, but not too far off, is to also support that same methodology for the metadata as well. Right? Since we know where we can get all that information out on the data side, we can also get it from the metadata. So we're looking to do that as well. So that way you can just do the pull directly from HCM from a metadata perspective. Okay? For those that don't have HCM, which I can't believe anybody would not have HCM, because that would just be the preferred HR system of choice, right? So if you have something else, what good does this do me? Why are you showing this to me? Well, because the mappings are there, right? The two target mappings are out of the box. Right? The reason why we do this and we offer this is, okay, we know HCM, we know strategic workforce planning and workforce. This is both strategic and workforce that you can use this with. Okay? We know where the data sits and what it looks like and where it needs to go. So we do the mapping for you. The only mapping you do is if you trim your hierarchy, right? Because we don't know what you've trimmed it to. Okay? We are working on that as well as a potential future enhancement. But what you can do is you can just connect this to your source. You know your data, you can look at where it needs to go and map it in. So it can be Workday, it can be SAP, it can be any system that you want. You can still leverage, I mean obviously the metadata piece, when we start connecting it, I don't know that would work directly because we wouldn't, we're not going to have the templates into the SAPs and the Workdays of the world, believe it or not. But then certainly the data you can still connect and pull the data in, right? But you can leverage this out of the box. Okay. What we're sourcing, again, just a quick view, the metadata, employee, job or position, whatever you call it, employee demographics, anything that exists in there. Others can be configured. That's the other thing. As with everything, it's configurable, right? We have what we think are the main pieces. You want more information that your system may have, you can modify it. And we have that in the white paper right now. Obviously, the white paper is going to transition to documentation. Marta, right there in the front, do our documentation for us. And then from a data perspective, this is where we're pulling from assignment tables, this information. The attrition rates are dependent on whether or not the system has it or not. If you don't have that attrition rate stuff, then you're going to have to come up with that in another way. Okay. And again, you can modify those. So you can register HCM extract as a data source application. As Mike Casey would have mentioned the other day, anything with a URL you can really connect to right from the cloud. So that's available now. We do the import format, the data load mapping, the data load rule. We also recognize with HCM that is a relational database, so people can actually enter in information at upper levels to us. And it's not just the target version type of stuff. They can enter in at total North America as 2 people, or the head of North America is, and the administrative assistant are 2. And then they have all the people below them, and it doesn't overwrite on the aggregation. So what we've done is we've worked through creating basically dummy upper level members. I would normally say dummy level 0, but to avoid extra mapping, we created the dummy upper level. So we take that upper level and we make it level 0, and we just add that same one as a total and make it apparent. Right? So we're trying to create that, recognize that we're going from a relational world where people can enter in anywhere up the hierarchy from our perspective. Clearly it's not a hierarchy for them, but we're translating it into our speak. Okay, there's another advantage of using HCM. We know that, we can do that, we're doing that out of the box. Okay? You can customize and extend. You want to do more or less, do more or less. Okay? So again, here's just some screenshots we've gone through with Mike, but the point here, the point here is to highlight that now, my pointer working here, a source system, if you cannot read that in the back, it says Fusion HCM Cloud. Right? So it's not just GL Cloud. So again, we're Oracle. We're working on making connectivity with all the other cloud products, whether or not they come up with a universal adapter, which has obviously been talked to Mike Casey about universal adapters, not me. But again, it's just you, as long as you have a URL, you can connect to it, you put in the username, it's a one-time configuration. Right? So why this? Again, it's an official Oracle solution, supported, maintained, and enhanced by Oracle. Well, what do we mean by enhanced? Well, if HCM makes a structural change to their data, we'll know about it. It's Oracle. So we can change our mapping or we can change our extract. If we make a change on EPBCS workforce planning, or strategic workforce planning, we'll know about it, we'll change it. So you can take that update and it's enhanced, right? It's supported by us, we own it. It's not just a one-off build, right? Starter kit, something we own and supply. We do regression testing off of it to make sure that nothing fails. Again, if we somehow, we're not perfect, as I'm sure everyone would agree, but if there's something that got changed and we missed a crack, hopefully the regression testing will certainly pick it up. It is a joint development effort between HCM and EPM teams, right? So we're working together on this, have been for quite some time. And it is, and this is the part, it's included in strategic workforce planning. It includes this, right? This integration is already there, right? So if you have it, it's not like you're licensing this extra. So when we talk about, oh, well, we have to build out this whole integration, we're going to have to buy all this stuff. No, it just comes with the solution. Okay. I get paid now because I showed that again. Questions. This was not as interactive, but we're talking about HR stuff, so maybe finance people just don't want to talk about it, or maybe you're just too hungry. Matt, you got a question?
For the strategic
Yep. So the question is, when you identify in strategic workforce planning that you have a hiring need, you've got a gap that you're short people, is that tied into the compensation workforce planning new hires? Right now it is not linked directly. But clearly you can go from, all right, it says I need to hire 20 people, you can immediately go right into your classic workforce planning, go to the new hires and add the 5 for that job. It is clearly on our roadmap item list to have that as what we're calling as actionable items, right? Because it's not just new hires, because it might be transferring, right? You might have multiple departments where you can pull from a pool of people that, hey, I need 5 Java developers, but they're existing somewhere else that they don't need them, right? So it's more than just new hires. It's the take action on that. What are the actionable items? Transfers, new hires, terminations, upskilling, reskilling. So that's all the stuff that we're working on the roadmap. But today it's a manual. And again, this is something where you can clearly create your own rule to do that, right? As an implementation partner. Again, this is what I say all the time with the EPBCS is if it doesn't do what you want it to do out of the box, make it do what you want to do out of the box. It's still PBCS under the covers, right? And what we also like to say is start with our out-of-box content. Modify it from there. Because that way it helps with support down the line when they say, hey, I've got a problem with workforce planning, business benefit calc X. If it's something that was using our stuff, we can help better with that versus when we look at it, oh, this is complete custom build, so now we have to reverse engineer whatever was implemented, right? The other advantage of it too is as we enhance the product, you can start with the modification, our out-of-box, modify it. We get wind of the fact that everybody is modifying this to the same extent. Maybe we change the behavior and it's easier for you or your customer to then, when we release that in the release content documentation, the README or the don't README, and we say we've changed it, you can say, hey, wait a second, now they're doing it the way I do it, so now I can get back onto the out-of-box content to then further leverage any future enhancements, optimizations beyond that, right? So starting with our stuff and modifying is preferential to just building from scratch. Is there a learning curve hurdle for implementation partners and customers that have been used to doing it all built from scratch? Yes. We've been working with partners to try to help get over that. We have training materials, things of that sort, videos. So we've been working with them to help get them over the hump of what is the expected behavior that we're doing here. Other questions? I'll get back to you since you just had one. Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question was, I talked about the ability to add a dimension in the future to an existing cube in EPBCS. Is there one for remove? Yes, so that's also on the roadmap. Because again, we know what to do. It's this same type of prompt. All right, you're deleting this, so what do I do with all that? What do you want to take the aggregated value data and keep that, or a particular member, and then we have to go back and delete it from all the artifacts. So that's on the roadmap, adding and removing. I would hazard a guess that adding would probably come first. Anyone else before I get back to Matt? Go ahead, Matt.
How have you found the reactions from the different customers you've been interacting with this type of data? Kind of a new, more sensitive area, I would imagine. I don't know if you're finding certain messaging is more resonating or...
Yeah, so question is, with some of the sensitive information, what's the reaction we've been getting from customers out there with having this information? So I have been dealing a lot more with HR group, and this brings me back to my first job out of college as a payroll administrator working in finance and dealing with HR, and HR likes pretty pictures, so I can tell you that. In terms of the sensitivity of the data, yes, that is out there, but we have some very large customers that are using this, and again, it's a very secure cloud, so I think they're comfortable with that. We get over that with SOC 1 and 2 compliance. We go through that. I have recently, I think last week, I had a customer set up a mini fire drill for me. Was the GDPR, the EU regulation for General Data Protection Regulation that goes into effect May 2018, which is exactly what I wanted to do the week before Kscope, was look up EU regulations, I can tell you that, and then talk with about 15 different lawyers at Oracle. So what we found is so there are other things out there about just general data protection. There are some people that are interpreting that as, and I think the quote that came back from this particular escalation issue is, you cannot have personally identifiable information, and that could include as simple as your employee ID, crossing borders from one country to another. So they're saying you're a cloud, it's based in Amsterdam or something, and I've got customers in Germany, UK, France. What are we going to do? That's a misinterpretation of it. You just have to be secure, right? It's making sure that you have all the security protocols in place. So we are certainly, if we're not already there, we will be in full compliance when that comes in on May 2018. But for the most part, people haven't done it. The one big one I have heard of, I think Germany has some very particular things about age-based, where that can't be out, date of birth can't be out there. But just because you enable it for everybody else doesn't mean you have to load up the data for Germany. Right? So I haven't seen too much pushback on that. I don't know if we're past that little bit of the hurdle to getting to cloud and what's out there. So I haven't really seen too much push. Are there customers in the room, or any of you concerned with that type of information out in the cloud? I mean, to me, it's no different than having it in your on-prem. You just have it. You have a concern about having that information available or not, and I don't think the cloud is the obstacle on that. Yes.
Yeah, kind of related to security. I was just wondering, with just the sharing, the fact that everything's in one application, do you ever run into situations where the finance person needs to have some sort of access at a plant type for the financials, and then for workforce, they need some access as well, so you can't put it on accounts necessarily to budget some of that, but they, just sharing the security kind of at that app level, if we talk about.
Yeah. So the question for the recording is, we've run into the issue where you have basically the ultimately question here is security by cube, right? Especially at the administration level, right? So certainly it's on our roadmap. It's been out there as an enhancement request for quite some time, right? And maybe the EPBCS is the bigger push to help make that come through. So it is on the roadmap. It's not. That's on the longer term portion of it right now. But a couple things with that. One is we're always happy to sell different pods to the different groups. Right? Different service instances, right? But where that becomes less of an issue now, I don't know if you saw Shankar's presentation yesterday with what's new and coming in PBCS, and that is the ability to connect to any pod from any other pod, right? So your security, you can have the two different instances and have the one presentation. It's sort of like Workspace on steroids, right? It's in Workspace today on premises, you can connect to multiple planning applications, right? With what we're coming out with on the common springboard is you can mash up within the navigation flow. When you saw those vertical tabs and horizontal tabs, you can have different horizontal and vertical tabs coming from multiple applications, any of the EPM applications, right? So some of that starts to address that, because hey, I truly do have two applications at that point. So you might not be an administrator in the other one, but you need to see certain information, so you'd be a user in that one, but you're a admin in the other one. So now so hopefully that starts to solve that, that type of solution. Right? Other questions? Anyone excited about this? One in the documentation person. All right. Any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you for your time. Fill out your evaluation forms and have a good rest of the case scope. Thank you.